could be purchased on the grid or from a central steam plant. PGW is also encouraging the development of gas-to-liquid plants, where natural gas is used as a feedstock to create other liquid fuels. And finally, PGW is leading the way, building partnerships with dozens of stakeholders to advance the natural gas vehicle market, where natural gas is used as a transportation fuel. It's happening right here in Philadelphia, here in Pennsylvania, across the country, and indeed across the world. Indeed, much is going on in the energy sector, and we're thrilled to be a part of the discussion. Our hope is that you'll use this conference as an opportunity to explore energy efficiency and clean energy initiatives and to fully participate in what is the largest energy efficiency and renewable energy expo held in the Northeast region. Over the next 2 days, the conference will take a close look at energy through various lenses: policy and trends, buildings, energy management, renewable energy, and new technology. This opening session is about strategic energy directions. And as you'll see, the presentations will touch on a little bit of everything. So here's our agenda. And I actually want to bring your attention to a couple changes to the program that occurred as a result of weather. Mr. Floyd Deschamps from Alliance to Save Energy was unable to be here with us this morning, but we were very fortunate to have been able to secure Mr. Brad Penney, who actually in previous line of work worked for the Alliance, and so we have him to replace Mr. Deschamps this morning. And also Ms. Katie Klaber from Marcellus Shale Coalition was unable to be here as well. And so we have the very capable President and CEO of Philadelphia Gas Works, Mr. Craig White, to replace her. So that said, here's our agenda. We'll have a welcome from the founder and executive director of AEE, followed by a few words of welcome from the president and CEO of the host sponsor, Philadelphia Gas Works. We'll then move into more substantive presentations on the future outlook of energy, how Pennsylvania Marcellus Shale is leading the way, how energy management meets energy markets, and how energy is creating a robust economy here in Pennsylvania. I'm sure that you'll find these presentations to be insightful, and we hope that you'll enjoy the entire conference as it unfolds over the next 2 days. So without further delay, let's get the program started. Next to the microphone is Mr. Albert Tunin, who has served as the founder and executive director of AEE for the past 35 years. Under his leadership, the organization has grown to over 16,000 professionals in 89 countries with 82 chapters around the world. He's authored more than 25 reference books on energy and personally trained more than 8,000 professionals on the efficient use of energy. Clearly a recognized leader in the energy sector, please join me in welcoming Mr. Albert Tunin.
I can't believe it, you guys showed. Welcome to GLOBALCON 2013. Look at those great sponsors and of course PGW as host. Without PGW, we would not be here today. 1977, God, I was a young kid working for Bechtel, and I said, you know what? I don't think there's an energy engineering profession. How many of you are employed in the energy engineering profession today? Isn't that amazing? It didn't exist back there, but guess what? We defined what the role of the energy engineer is, and through our energy manager program, the Certified Energy Manager, we created a need for energy managers around the world. You know, the last 5 years have been really challenging for most companies. Think about it, we doubled our membership to 16,000 over those 5-year period. Why? Because we're the most exciting, dynamic organization that you're ever going to be part of. Think about it. Where can you go and meet such a great cross-section of professionals representing every segment of the energy efficiency marketplace? Right here. That's our membership. It's a very exciting, and if you're not a member, please talk to your neighbor who I'm sure is a member, and you will find out more about that profession. You know, a lot of people like to be in sustainable development. They talk about sustainable development. First, in 1978, astronaut Al Warden at the World Energy Engineering Congress, his speech had to deal with sustainable development. So sustainable development is nothing new to us. That's part of who we are. A lot of organizations are now starting certifications. Wow, we started it in 1981. So how many certified energy managers do we have here today? Thank you. Wow, we're proud of you guys, because you guys are in the forefront of the energy management profession. Certified energy managers are not just here in the United States. Went to last summer to Madrid, and we had our first Spanish-speaking class in Spain. We have a French version of our program. The State Department asked us to develop an Arabic version of our program for the Iraqi engineers. So we have CEMs and CEM training programs. Right now we just finished a program for Dubai, and we've been invited to help develop the energy infrastructure in efficiency for Saudi Arabia. And that's a sort of an interesting first of its kind, that the Saudis want to be in the forefront in energy efficiency. Well, you know, as you can say, a lot of us are getting a little bit older, but you guys are young. But think about it, almost 40% of our members will probably retire in the next 10 years. Not me, of course. So the key is, how do you develop and mentor new people to get into this field? And through the foundation of the Association of Energy Engineers, we've given out almost $700,000 in scholarships. And you're welcome to come to the Seawheel Breakfast. Mary Ann Campbell, would you raise your hand? And through the Council of Women in Energy and Environmental Leadership, we are mentoring young women to get into this field. So, I mean, if you look at AEE, we're certainly in the forefront. We have a vision that energy efficiency is really the backbone of our society. Global climate change initiatives, certainly we've been promoting, but there's only one bad thing about AEE. The last time we gave our conference in Washington, D.C., there was Superstorm Sandy that affected a lot of people, and here we are bringing this major snowstorm to Washington Northeast. We're from the South. You can tell from my accent, by the way, I'm from the South. South Bronx, that is. So anyway, I want to say that have fun, get to meet all the vendors, come to our reception tonight at the Hard Rock Cafe, because the true benefit of AE is the networking. And you're going to meet some of the best people in our industry. Please find out about AE, get more involved, and I want to say thank you for going out of your way to attend GLOBALCON 2013. Thank you.
The next voice that you'll hear is that of Craig White, President and CEO of the Philadelphia Gas Works. With more than 33 years of service, including more than a decade as COO before being appointed to CEO, Mr. White learned the gas business from the ground up and is recognized as a thought leader in the national gas market, locally and nationally. Mr. White serves on the board of the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, the American Gas Association, and is the past chairman and executive board member of the American Public Gas Association. Mr. White also sits on the board of the National Petroleum Council by appointment in 2010 by Secretary of Energy Chu. Here to offer welcoming remarks on behalf of PGW, please join me in welcoming our President and CEO, Mr. Craig White.
Good morning, good morning. I guess I'm here for the third official welcome. First it was Doug, then it was Al, now it's me. Again, this is the third time in the last 4 years that we've been here in Philadelphia for GLOBALCON, and I want to thank Al personally at this time for giving us that opportunity. We certainly appreciate being the host company, and we're very excited about what's going to transpire over the next 2 days. The good news is I'm only up here for 10 minutes. The bad news is I'm going to be back up here in about 15 minutes because Katie Klaber was not able to make it due to snow. The funny thing is, the last time GLOBALCON was here in Philadelphia, some of you who may have attended may recall that Governor Rendell was a speaker. And I had a nice 15-minute presentation all prepared. And they walked up to me and said, cut it to 2 because the Gov has to leave. So today it was, hey, can you talk a little longer? Because we had a few folks not make it because of snow. So I'll do my best. I think it's easier to expand than it is to contract. So hopefully I'll have a few added points that I wasn't going to raise, but I can raise today. We have obviously a great group of speakers, and I very much appreciate their attendance and pinch hitting as well. Before I go any further, I want to recognize that we have with us today State Representative Ed Nielsen. And Ed, if you'd raise your hand, thank you very much for attending. We also have representatives of the offices of Representative Brendan Boyle and his brother Kevin Boyle, who are both representatives, by the way, Representative Mark Cohen, Representative Sherelle Parker, Representative John Taylor, and Senators Shirley Kitchen and Christine Tartaglione. I very much appreciate the fact that they sent staff members in, and we look forward to meeting them a little bit later and talking to them further. As Doug mentioned, GLOBALCON is the largest energy efficiency and renewable energy exposition in the Northeast. And obviously, we're not here just to talk about natural gas, but I hope you'll bear with me because I am from the gas company. And I very much like the opportunity to extol all the virtues of natural gas. And with that being said, I think it's fair to say that natural gas has taken a command position in the U.S. energy landscape. You, if you've ever been party to or have read articles regarding energy policy discussions, there is not a U.S. energy policy discussion or a Pennsylvania policy discussion where natural gas is not a key component. Each and every conversation contains natural gas, and that's largely because we have a lot of it. We have an awful lot of it. Natural gas technologies are definitely on the upswing, and it's something that has solved age-old problems. We have technologies now that are reducing pollution and increasing energy efficiency. The future for natural gas technologies is exceedingly bright. And I know Doug mentioned natural gas vehicle technology, but there's also, and I believe he also mentioned combined heat and power and the use of natural gas microturbines, engines, and turbines. Even natural gas fuel cells are in the conversation. Now, Mayor Nutter has pronounced over his 5 years in office that he wants Philadelphia to be the greenest city in the country. And you ask yourself, well, why does he want to do that? Well, besides it being the right thing to do, the mayor recognizes that there's a marketability to sustainability and living in a place, a green place, a place that's environmentally friendly. Businesses today are developing sustainability missions. Companies are deciding to locate their offices in green buildings. And parents don't want their children playing in schoolyards where there's a stack with black smoke bellowing out of that stack. Take Temple University. Temple University was one of the smallest customers among our transportation customers. The students at Temple University demanded a change. They demanded that that university participated in the cleaning of our environment. Now they're our second largest customer in our system. Second largest customer. The world is changing, and it's changing right before our eyes. Now I'd like to take just a few minutes and go beyond sustainability and energy efficiency. Shale gas, and largely Pennsylvania shale gas, has revolutionized the natural gas industry. There is an abundance of supply, and as a result, we've enjoyed over the last few years stable prices and low prices. And I think we're going to continue to enjoy stable pricing and lower pricing well into the future. But in southeastern Pennsylvania, that's not good enough. We get the same benefit here that everyone else in the country is receiving, and that is lower natural gas prices. But we are Pennsylvanians. We're sitting in the state that is referred to as the Saudi Arabia of natural gas. If we're the Saudi Arabia of natural gas, industry should be proliferating and we should all have jobs. But we have a tremendous amount of people in the southeastern part of the state that are unemployed. We have to find ways to employ those folks. And the best way to do that, in my thinking, with the natural gas capability of the state of Pennsylvania is to bring industry back to this region, to bring it back to Philadelphia, to bring it back to southeastern Pennsylvania. But we need help doing it. There's first cost barriers. These technologies, in some cases, are more expensive. But the long-term benefits of these technologies, probably most of you in the room recognize those long-term benefits, are really the key to our future. 40% of the population in the state of Pennsylvania lives right here in southeastern Pennsylvania, right here in this area. Yet we're not benefiting to the degree we should benefit from the largest natural gas find. It's not the largest in the world, because I think you're going to hear a little bit later that China probably has a little more shale gas than us. But we have the ability to get it to market. No place else in the world can do that. We can do it right here. So we need our thought leaders, our political leaders, and those of you that are in the room today to help make existing businesses more efficient and more cost effective. We need to help attract new industry back, and we need to do it sooner rather than later. What kind of help? Well, as I mentioned, we need the incentives. We need some additional support, because we've got to develop these markets. We've got to start. We've got to bring the energy to these markets that heretofore has not been there. If this happens, everybody wins. Western and central Pennsylvania, they have a product that's changing their economy. They need to keep up the demand for that product. Industry, they're going to win because we have a willing and capable workforce in this region. And not only that, we are in close proximity to the fuel that's the lifeblood of their industry. And then certainly southeastern Pennsylvania wins because we start to employ people who today are not employed. We insert energy back into the economy that hasn't been there for my entire lifetime. Now, is it going to happen overnight? Maybe not. But did any of us think that 3 years ago the shale gas revolution would occur? So I submit to you, think about that. Because I think we can make change in this part of the state quickly, and it can benefit our citizenry to a very great degree. So thank you very much. Enjoy Philadelphia and enjoy GLOBALCON.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. We're now going to begin the presentation portion of this opening session. Again, we appreciate both Mr. Penney and Mr. White for pitch hitting in the final moments. But again, there is no shortage of expertise from either of these two gentlemen, so I think we will all be pleased with what we hear and what we're able to learn during their presentations. As the master of ceremony, my job is to introduce the speakers, but what they didn't tell you is that my job is also to keep time. So I've got the clicker here for anybody who has presentations, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hang on to it. And if your presentations are taking too long, I'm just going to move you along. Come on, y'all. You know that's funny. Okay, all right. I'm not going to do that, but the clicker is here for our presenters. When you're done with the presentation, please leave it here for the next presenter. Our first presenter today is Mr. Brad Penney, General Counsel for the National Association for State Community Service Programs. Mr. Penney leads advocacy efforts on Capitol Hill on programs benefiting low-income Americans, including the Community Service Block Grant Program and the Weatherization Program, which provides energy efficiency improvements for low-income Americans. He also helps to build and lead advocacy coalitions consisting of utilities, trade associations, and other partner organizations interested in supporting low-income issues in energy legislation. In early 2009, he created the Energy Efficiency Coalition, which now has more than 80 participating organizations. From 2007 to 2011, Mr. Penney served as the Director of Government Relations for the Alliance to Save Energy where he was closely involved in the enactment of Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009, and numerous other energy bills. His previous experience includes 12 years on Capitol Hill, a law practice in Washington, and serving as the Washington, D.C. representative for the University of Massachusetts Amherst. He's published numerous articles in many publications. I won't get into them all, but please join me in welcoming Mr. Brad Penney.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to see you here on this snowy day in Philadelphia. Glad we're in Philadelphia, not Washington, D.C., because I talked to my colleagues earlier. City of Washington, D.C. is closed. Bill Kent had a good idea. Perhaps that will count as a furlough day. But the federal government is closed, Congress is closed, and that's probably a good thing. So good to be here, and look forward to just do with a clicker as we did at the Academy Awards when it's time, just start the music. So, talking about Washington, D.C. right now is potentially a very sensitive subject. A couple of weeks ago, a friend of mine told me that the Chinese word for crisis is a combination of the words danger and opportunity. And that's going to be the theme of my remarks to you this morning, danger and opportunity. And because we have plenty of both right now in Washington, D.C. So let's start off, if we could, with the danger side of the equation, and then we'll move on to the opportunity side. And let me just say that a lot of what I'm going to say here this morning is a preview of the workshop we're going to do. We're going to drill down into greater detail this afternoon at 2 o'clock, right down the hall here in room 126A at 2 p.m. And I have Ryan Hodem here, one of our great speakers for the panel this afternoon. So if you'd like to drill a little bit deeper into the subjects we're going to talk about very briefly in my remarks, please join us at 2 o'clock. Danger. Well, you know, we are dealing in Washington, D.C. with some issues that, quite frankly, we've never faced before in the history of our republic. Prolonged government by gridlock. Yes, there have been times historically where the Congress and the President have been divided. In fact, I think that's happened more often than not in the history of our nation. But this is really the first time that we have hit an impasse where the regular order in the consideration of congressional appropriations bills, the routine transacting of business in the House and Senate has in many ways become dysfunctional. So what are the threats and dangers that we face, and what does this mean for the energy services world? Sequestration has already happened. Furlough notices going out, in many cases have already gone out to contractors in the Washington, D.C. area. $85 billion in cuts. And the irony of sequestration going into effect is that when it was enacted in the summer of 2011, it was enacted with the very idea that it was so draconian that it would never happen. The reason the Republicans and the Democrats put it together in that way was as a force majeure to force the Congress into meaningful negotiations, which never happened. So now the sword of Damocles has come down in the form of sequestration. We face other dangers in the road ahead, most imminently the March 27th deadline on the continuing resolution. And while both parties have said that they do not want to risk a shutdown of the government and everything that would entail, the simple fact of the matter is there's no basis to believe today that there will be an agreement on the continuing resolution. As you know, the regular order appropriations bills for fiscal year 13 were not passed. So we are on a 6-month continuing resolution. It expires March 27th. If the Congress does not act, the government will shut down. Will that happen? Well, you need a Ouija board, I think, to know the answer to that. We saw what did not happen with sequestration. I myself, having observed this process up close, am pessimistic, but I think that the greatest moving force on the Congress right now is the fear of public outrage, because the taxpayers are getting fed up And I think that is being communicated to members of Congress by their constituents. There's also a factor in the House of Representatives in that the Speaker, John Boehner, of course, traditionally the Speaker has, vast powers. But his powers are really curbed by the fact that you have the Tea Party faction, which is very energized and very strong in the House of Representatives. So I think the Speaker actually would like to reach some kind of global agreement with the President on deficit reduction that would involve some revenue enhancement. And as you all know, the stumbling block to compromise is revenue enhancement. However, there is a very significant and highly motivated group of Republicans in the House of Representatives who would rather see this government shut down than any revenue enhancements at all. So that's the stumbling block. But if we talk about the dangers, sequestration number 1, the continuing resolution number 3, and then to add to the mix, coming up in May, is going to be the debt ceiling. And that is one that has a unique mischief-making potential, which is very dangerous to our republic. In that, obviously, if there is a government shutdown, if there's no continuing resolution, that's going to be a lot of pain. And of course, like sequestration, that imposes a real cost on our economy. But the debt ceiling, it's unprecedented in our democracy for Congress to refuse to raise the debt ceiling. I worked 12 years on the Hill, and it was always considered, nobody wanted to raise the debt ceiling, but it was something that happened virtually automatically. Everybody just sort of gulped and voted for it. But now, the price of not raising the debt ceiling is to roil the financial markets. We saw what happened with the credit rating for the U.S. government in 2011. So we face that specter again, and I think that is really a huge danger for our democracy. We have a lot of foreign nations who do not wish us well, quite frankly, and the opportunity to play with interest rates in international markets is going to be very, very tempting. So again, going back to my Chinese word for crisis, concluding on the danger side, I see government by gridlock continuing. The one thing that could break it is the president is putting virtually all the chips on the line to elect a Democratic House in 2014. Obviously, if he's able to do that, that will break the Republican hold and the situation that Speaker Boehner faces. However, what do you think the impact is of the White House confirming, as they have done, that that's the president's stated goal, to elect a Democratic House next year? What do you think the impact of that is on the Republicans' desire to compromise right now with the president? Well, you can just imagine. So one can certainly understand the president's frustration. The president's party actually did increase the number of seats in both the House and Senate, although they did not take the House back. But they have more senators, and yet, because of the filibuster rule, which was not significantly changed, a supermajority of 60 votes is needed by the party that controls the Senate to enact legislation, and the Democrats don't have that. All right, if I've depressed you and you've decided, oh God, I'm not going to go to that 2 o'clock workshop, I'll just get further depressed about sequestration and all these really, really bad things that are happening. Let's talk on the opportunity side, because, I've been 30 years in Washington working on the Hill and lobbying, and I must say that as bleak as the government by gridlock scenario is, I think the opportunities are very, very exciting. So let's start with the new Energy Secretary, Ernie Moniz, the new EPA Administrator, Gina McCarthy. I think they are both very, very strong choices. Gina McCarthy is a take-no-prisoners expert on the Clean Air Act. She's an experienced clean air regulator. When I was the Washington, D.C. representative for the University of Massachusetts, Amherst campus, Massachusetts is my home state. I worked closely with Gina McCarthy. She was then in the Massachusetts Executive Office of Environmental Affairs. I was very, very impressed with her bare knuckles Boston political style, and I think she is going to be really a great, great force at the EPA. So, what's the significance of these 2 appointments? Well, given the government by gridlock, I think the president has wisely decided to tackle climate change, which he mentioned so extensively in the State of the Union, using executive branch tools available to him. And I think we're going to be very, very surprised in the next several years at the extent to which the administration will go around Congress and rely upon executive action under the Clean Air Act and other laws to implement climate change and other clean energy measures. I think we'll see an early decision on the Keystone Pipeline. Everything that I'm hearing right now is that the administration's ready to approve it. Of course, it would create a lot of new jobs in the United States and 800,000 barrels a day of oil coming from a friendly nation. Consider Venezuela is our fourth largest supplier of oil. Who knows with the death of Chavez, what that means. Clearly, the president wants to move us from the dependence upon foreign sources of oil. So my prediction is that the administration will embrace the Keystone Pipeline. I think one thing that we will see, interestingly enough, is I think we'll see the Democratic Obama administration at odds with environmental groups. A lot of the environmentalists are not happy about the selection of Ernie Moniz. As you know, he's very close to the natural gas industry and to the nuclear industry. And I think that reflects, obviously, the president's priorities in the energy field. But I think that as we get into issues of the environmental impacts of extracting, shipping, and refining the oil from the Keystone Pipeline, and also, quite frankly, issues that exist with regard to the environmental impacts of hydraulic fracturing, which we'll hear a great deal about at this conference, I think those are going to be areas where we're actually going to see some tension between Sierra Club environmental groups and the administration. I think the president is going to come down on the side of natural gas, taking us away from foreign dependence on imported oil, and on the job creation factor with the Keystone Pipeline. Now, EPA. Al and I were talking earlier this morning that regulations are expected on new power plants later this year, which would power new coal-fired power plants, excuse me, unless they could include a technology that would capture carbon emissions, carbon gas emissions. This technology exists, but it has not been proven in commercial scale. So I think that in addition to the regs that are expected on new coal-fired power plants, I think regulations that are also expected from Gina McCarthy now to limit emissions from existing power plants are going to be very, very controversial. They have the implication for an increase in energy prices and also, quite frankly, for loss of jobs. So I think that's going to be a very difficult calculus for the administration to make that decision. But I think that EPA will go ahead with those regulations, and I think you'll see that Gina McCarthy is going to prove to be a very determined and effective advocate for those regulations, even though some of them may be challenged in court. So as I said, I think we'll see a lot of action by the Department of Energy and EPA on climate change using the Clean Air Act and other existing sources where Congress has already passed laws. Other things to expect from DOE, I think we'll see new appliance standards, appliance efficiency standards, as we all know, have been one of the most effective energy efficiency initiatives in the last 20 years. All of the efficiency bills that have been enacted have been signed by Republican presidents, which is interesting. There's strong bipartisan support for energy efficiency and appliance standards. And the Alliance to Save Energy, my predecessor organization, has been in the lead in advocating for tough new appliance efficiency standards. I think we'll see more of that in the next few years. It seems to me the other issue that Ernie Moniz is going to have to deal with is nuclear power. Clearly, the president has nuclear in his mix of all of the above energy policies. And I think Moniz is going to have to deal with the nuclear waste issue, both on the civilian side as well as the military side. As many of you know, it's now over 20 years since Congress created the Environmental Management Program at DOE, which deals with the nuclear weapons cleanup. Reports in the last few weeks of leaking tanks at the Hanford nuclear facility in Washington State. The federal government has actually, not many people pay attention to this, paid out billions of dollars in penalties as a result of lack of compliance with standards for nuclear waste. So I think that's an issue, actually. I think Moniz, with his MIT nuclear physicist background. I think he's uniquely suited to deal with that, and I think you'll hear a great deal more about nuclear, the waste issue, particularly as the administration pursues nuclear as part of a broad-based energy strategy. So that's the situation with DOE and the Environmental Protection Agency. I just want to briefly mention the State of the Union message. And the President wants to continue the doubling of energy sources from wind and solar. And I think you'll see an increased emphasis on getting to that fuel economy standard of 54.5 miles per gallon by the year 2025. Wouldn't that be wonderful if we in fact can get there? The President wants to make the production tax credit permanent. And one thing from the standpoint of those of us who are big energy efficiency advocates is he wants to increase energy productivity by the year 2030. And my good friend and colleague Floyd Deschamps, if you were able to be here today, would have talked to you about the Alliance to Save Energy's recently released commission report on energy efficiency. Floyd led an effort at the Alliance, about a 6-month effort, and it was a very unique public-private partnership funded entirely by the Alliance. And they brought together leading experts in the industry and government and a lot of NGO support on energy efficiency recommendations for the future. It's an excellent report. If you go to the ASE website, www.ase.org, I would urge you to look at it. I think it's going to be a major part of the dialogue on energy efficiency in the next couple of years. And I think the President's reference to doubling energy productivity by 2030 in some ways is a reflection of the recommendations contained in the ASE report. So I think that's something that you'll want to be aware of going forward. Sorry that Floyd could not be here this morning to talk to you personally about this. So, other things that the President mentioned in the State of the Union, which we're going to drill into this afternoon with Ryan Hodem and our other speakers. The energy efficiency race to the top for states, modeled after the similar race to the top in the education area. I think you'll see race to the top awards to help state governments that implement innovative energy efficiency policies. One thing that I think on the opportunity side that is very exciting, and particularly glad to be here in Pennsylvania, which is a state of such great innovation in the energy side at the state level. I think you're going to see the states as the best laboratory for innovation in the next few years. There may not be a lot of new legislation coming out of Congress, but I think you're going to see some very, very exciting things happening at the state level, starting with the race to the top, because the administration is very, very serious about that as one of the President's legacy issues. The President also proposed an energy security trust fund to reduce the impact of price spikes in energy. This is something that would help a lot of the clients we serve, low-income Americans. As you know, energy is a huge disproportionate burden on low-income Americans who pay anywhere from 15 to 50% of their discretionary income just to heat and cool their homes. It's incredible. Middle-class Americans pay about 3 or 4% of their income every year to heat and cool their homes. So this is something that the Energy Security Trust Fund, something our organizations are strongly supporting. Project Rebuild, I just mentioned very briefly, which is to deal with foreclosed and abandoned properties, $15 billion initiative to create new construction jobs, said that there will ultimately be 12 million foreclosed properties in America. And we are very excited about using the 30-plus weatherization training centers funded by the Recovery Act to train workers to go out and do energy efficiency retrofits in these foreclosed properties so that they can be either put back on the market for resale or taken out of the resale market and made available for affordable low-income housing, which is a desperate need in this country given the long-term unemployment that we face. So let me just briefly bring this to a conclusion by saying that on the opportunity side, I do see very significant opportunities for innovation at the state level, for creativity and innovation by the new Secretary of Energy and the new EPA administrator. We are very excited about the new chair of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon. He is a great proponent of energy efficiency. We did a conference call with him just a few weeks ago where he reiterated his very strong support for efficiency. He really wants to work with the stakeholder community. He's someone who I think will continue the bipartisan tradition on the committee that Jeff Bingaman started. Lisa Murkowski, as you know, is the ranking Republican, and that's really a crucial committee in terms of getting new legislation. And even better has been some of the statements that Fred Upton, the Republican chair of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, he has said that he is really committed to moving an efficiency bill this year. And we are very, very hopeful that the S-1000, which is the Portman Shaheen Energy Efficiency Bill, portions, very, very small technical portions of it were enacted late last year. Our coalition is very, very hopeful that we can get that enacted working with Mr. Upton's committee in the House. So I think there's further reason for opportunity and optimism looking at smaller energy bills, but those bills, of course, can have a very significant impact on energy efficiency and achieving the goal of doubling energy productivity over the next 20 years. So I'm sure that Ryan and our other speakers will have a lot more to say this afternoon at 2 o'clock in room 126A, just to put in another promo for our workshop. And there's a lot to talk about when it comes to what's going on in Washington, D.C. I've moved you through this a little bit more quickly than I would have liked, but I think it gives you an indication of both the challenges and the opportunities that we face as government by gridlock continues for the foreseeable future. Thank you and enjoy the conference.
Thank you, Mr. Penney. As expected, our next presenter is Mr. Craig White, President and Chief Executive Officer of Philadelphia Gas Works. As I mentioned earlier, Mr. White learned the gas business from the ground up. And with 33 years of service at PGW, he's seen the company at both the best of times and at the worst of times. I'll leave it to him to explain, but I think he'd be the first to acknowledge that PGW is on the brink of the best of times, and a large part of that positive outlook is the presence of shale gas and its effect on price locally, nationally, and internationally. Here to discuss further the impact of Marcellus Shale, please welcome again Mr. Craig White.
I know, it's a little strange. But Katie Klaber, who's a good friend of mine, she fills a lot of airspace. I'm sorry, did I say that out loud? But I'm going to try to do my best with her presentation. Normally, when you pinch hit your own thoughts and ideas. I'm going to try to pick up on some of the things that the Marcellus Shale Coalition wants to talk about, because I've been at a number of different events where she has in the past spoken. As far as Mr. Penney, I will say that I've seen pinch hitters before. That was a grand slam. Thank you very much. Yeah, okay, now I'm challenged. Keep hitting the buttons till I... Tough. There's 2 buttons on here. There we go. Much of the, I had the opportunity to look at Katie's slides about 10 minutes before we started here today. And I will tell you that the first couple of slides I'm just going to run through. They have a lot to do with the Marcellus Shale Coalition, who they are, when they started, and there's a large emphasis on the fact that they have an acute recognition of the fact that they're dealing in an industry that is a mystery to the public in a lot of ways, and that they have to do a lot of things to be very transparent in order to continue to be able to extract and produce natural gas and other liquids. So as I said, I'm going to breeze through the first couple of slides. That slide's a representation of what you never do when you do a slide. Too many words. But since Katie's not here, I can talk about it. Now, this next slide I find to be very interesting. This gives you an idea of the shale plays around the world. And you can see that there is a tremendous amount of natural gas available and other liquids in shale gas around the world. You'll note that China, talking about 1.275 trillion cubic feet. That's even larger than what we have here in the U.S. Big issue there, of course, in many of these other regions, as I mentioned before, there's no infrastructure to bring the production to market. In the United States, we have a very capable and very mature interstate pipeline grid, which allows us to get natural gas from just about anywhere to market. This is a picture of the Marcellus Shale with the Utica shaded underneath it. Most of this drilling and most of the production today is from the Marcellus Shale, and that's the yellow highlighted area. You can see that when we go a little deeper and we start to drill in the Utica formation, there's probably going to be some new estimates of how many years we have of natural gas. I think the estimates are predicated on how we use natural gas today. And the way we use it today, we have about 120 years of natural gas. When they start to really identify what is actually available, I think that number is going to go up. Interesting slide here. You can see where, now I know why we couldn't get oil conversions. Because natural gas and oil were moving hand in glove, and in a lot of cases, natural gas was more expensive. Look at the scenario you have today. And that gap has been there for quite some time, and I expect that gap will be there into the future. Now, this is pretty complicated, this slide, and it's tough for me to see it from here. But I do know that what it represents is the fact that you can see that natural gas is not the only player in town. We rely very heavily on coal for electric generation in this country, but natural gas is replacing a number of old coal plants. I think Mr. Penney alluded to the fact that clean air requirements on existing plants will be their biggest challenge. But certainly there are other energy sources other than natural gas that are in the mix here and will stay in the mix. But certainly natural gas is a key component. And at this point, I think this is basically a lead-in slide for these four categories. So I'm going to quickly go through them. Electric generation and heating. I think the point made on this slide is the fact that for the first time, coal and natural gas fired generation are basically at the same point. And you can see that much of the generation was done by coal in the past, and as plants are retired, natural gas plants replace those coal plants, and now you're seeing just about the same amount of electricity being generated by natural gas-fired plants as you do coal-fired plants. Combined heat and power, we talked about that a little bit. Obviously, this is something that's near and dear to Philadelphia Gas Works because of the great efficiencies of generating electricity at your site, and the key being to find a utilization for that waste steam. But this is something that I think we're all going to hear a lot more about, and I think Katie has a slide here that indicates the amount of CHP nationally. In fact, there it is. You can see that the amount of capacity that is being generated is exceedingly high compared to where it was just a couple of years ago. Transportation applications. I'm not even going to try to decipher this. We all know that in, I think, California and Nevada, UPS, all their long-haul trucking is LNG. Every truck is a liquefied natural gas truck. And many fleets across the country have converted to natural gas. And as I said, for long-haul trucking, it's LNG. In the Philadelphia alone, we have 15,000 fleet vehicles operating on the streets of Philadelphia. And they are virtually all gas and diesel. So we have to do something about that if we want to clean the environment and we want to move this technology forward. What you see on this slide is the fact that nationally, if you move to natural gas, you're going to pay a lot less per gallon equivalent, than you would for gasoline. And herein lies the trick. The vehicle is about 33% more expensive, but the savings over the lifetime of that vehicle are exceedingly good at this point. And the only unknown there is where natural gas will be in the future. My position is that natural gas, as long as demand stays strong, natural gas pricing will stay stable, and it will stay at very low prices. So I believe that moving to natural gas vehicles will serve any fleet or any other individual who wants to get in that arena very well. I recognize this. When I was up here before, I tried to caution you that it wasn't all about natural gas, but I'm speaking for Katie, and she's all about natural gas. Here again, we have a slide that talks about air emissions. And it's no secret that there's a lot of folks out there that believe that the only way to clean the environment is wind, solar, biofuels. Well, I agree with all that, and I think we need to do as much as we possibly can in that arena. But we're not going to get a cleaner environment without introducing natural gas to replace dirtier fossil fuels. And one of the problems we have politically and locally is that people don't look at natural gas as a greening fuel, when in fact it is. It's supplanting diesel, it's supplanting gasoline, and if it's done in the form of CHP, it's actually being used more efficiently. So again, it's reducing emissions. So from Philadelphia Gas Works standpoint, and from folks at the Marcellus Shale Coalition, we look at natural gas as a green fuel. Hence all the green shirts from the plants that I put out there for questions. Oops. Now, this slide was, actually I learned something here today. I didn't realize that the wet gas was actually that far west. Everything to the right of that dotted line is what we call dry gas. Dry gas, you can produce it and you can put it right into a gas burning piece of equipment. Needs no refining. Wet gas, on the other hand, has other hydrocarbons, as you'll see. And here's a breakdown. I know Mr. Moser's in the audience. He's my chief operating officer and he's a chemical engineer. And he loves to talk about hexanes and butanes and propane and so forth. Well, that's all the wet liquids that are in natural gas to the left of that arrow in the previous slide. Everything to the left of that arrow you see in this liquids portion of the slide. And one of the phenomena that's happening today is if demand is not strong for natural gas, the money will go into production and to drilling in wells where liquids exist, because that's where the money is. You're going to get a lot more money out of a liquids well than you will out of a dry gas well. What we need to do is make sure that the industry and the demand in this country is strong enough that producers to the right of that arrow continue to drill and continue to produce. Now, I think that refers to the ethylene chain, and I'm assuming that's all the different areas in the, places that we use that type of product. I fumbled that one, didn't I? Companies returning to the U.S. There's one major that's not on that list, Dow Chemical. I just was at a presentation from the Senior Vice President, Dow Chemical, down in Washington. He said, we're betting on America. We're bringing our chemical business back to the United States because we're betting on shale gas. Now, that means that they feel very strongly that The environmental lobbyists that believe that fracking is not in our best interest will not carry the day. I believe very strongly that they will not carry the day because we've been fracking for many, many years. And it's just, it's a bad word. And it's certainly, I wish we could have called it something else, but certainly it's not something that I believe that we have to have a fear of. We just have to do things, and we have regulation to ensure that we do it appropriately. But as I said, companies like Dow Chemical are going to bring jobs back to this country. Well, the more important thing is, Dow Chemical is an industry that brings an awful lot of thought leaders. It brings an awful lot of creativity back to this country that has heretofore gone elsewhere. So we're going to bring inventors and people that deal with the chemical industry back into this country where we've lost them. I'm sorry, I just can't see that slide. Okay. Now, with respect to the shale economic spectrum, we always talk about, and we do this in Philadelphia, when we introduce a new idea, what are all the collateral benefits for the economy? If you bring natural gas vehicles into Philadelphia and fleet operators start to use natural gas vehicles, you're going to have mechanics, you're going to have gas stations, you're going to have people that have to rebuild the operating garages of these facilities or these operators. So there's a lot of collateral benefits. That's what this row or these concentric circles are exhibiting. The fact that not only are people benefiting who are actually doing the drilling, who are on the rig sites, there are also others that are benefiting significantly. Hence, I believe that there are counties in western Pennsylvania that are the fastest growing counties in the country. And the economics are so strong in western Pennsylvania, all because of the fact that they have industry. And if you recall earlier, what I was saying was that southeastern Pennsylvania is not benefiting like western Pennsylvania. Well, the way we can benefit is to benefit them as well. We can use their product, and we can benefit here by putting people to work and creating industry. Now, of course, Marcellus Shale wants to, Katie, if she were here today, she would obviously want to really emphasize the fact that this industry is one of the most heavily regulated industries. She would emphasize the fact that that the coalition is measured by their weakest link. So their weakest link cannot be weak because it will affect them all. And what you're seeing is an organization that's embracing the oversight, embracing the regulation, because that's the only way they're going to be allowed to produce their product. Again, transparency being a key item in the overall focus of the Shale Coalition. There's been a campaign. I believe it has it's a two-part campaign. The first part was a listening campaign, where there's a lot of money spent on advertising and on to reach out to the public to get questions about various issues such as fracking. And now the Marcellus Shale Coalition is taking a lot of that input and moving forward with answers and responses. They got a lot smarter, and I think you're going to see that we're all going to be fairly well educated as just citizens on the entire value chain and the actual methods utilized to produce natural gas. Now, I've been out to a drilling site, and actually what you're seeing today is that instead of the frac water being removed by truck and taken to a location where it can be cleaned, they're actually putting in pipelines now. As I saw it, the 1 weak link was the fact that you could have a spill above ground. And I think what you're seeing is the industry is doing everything they can to eliminate the possibility of a spill. Now, I don't know whether any of you are aware of the fact, but the city of Philadelphia has a very strong position on fracking. They do not want fracking to occur in the Delaware River basin. The Prancer, who heads up the DEP in Pennsylvania, has stated publicly that they have the same rules for the Susquehanna River Basin, the Ohio River Basin, and the Delaware River Basin. They don't plan to protect people any better or any worse in any of those basins. And they believe that the folks, and they know that the folks in the Susquehanna and Ohio River basins are doing just fine. There hasn't been any issues with regard to the extraction of natural gas through the fracking process. Again, I'm going to allow you to just breeze through those slides. These aren't my slides, but certainly I think they will be made available now. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. Our third presenter is responsible for managing and expanding Constellation's load response and energy efficiency portfolio across North America, as well as their on-site customer solar sales. Mr. Farmer joined Constellation in connection with Constellation's acquisition of C-Power, one of the leading companies in demand response and energy management. As Chief Executive Officer of C-Power at that time, Mr. Farmer was responsible for advancing the company's portfolio and expanding its presence into new markets. Please welcome Mr. Gary Farmer.
Good morning, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here on behalf of Constellation with AEE and to be here with PGW, which is a partner. We're a partner working on the ABR together, so thanks to Craig and for subbing and doing such a good job. I actually see Albert walking over there. I apologize if I'm a little bit distracted because when Albert presented and he said something about South Bronx, actually, I closed my eyes and I couldn't help but think of Larry King. It sounds just like Larry King. So now, if I'm distracted and a little bit off, it's because I'm just fantasizing about taking him this afternoon, making some phone calls to some Chinese restaurants for takeout with him as Larry King. I kind of want to do that. I don't know if he's going to let me. We'll work on that later. Maybe it depends on the quality of my presentation. So a lot of what we've spoken about here so far is policy. I am not that big a fan of policy. And I think since most of your engineers, maybe you guys have some problems with policy. My experience with policy is it falls kind of into two categories. Most policy is sort of like such stupid common sense that it shouldn't even be said. Like things like, let me think of one. We stand firmly behind our allies and friends. Is that really policy? You know, it's like, yeah, we stand behind our friends. Some policies make sense to accelerate something that should be happening but isn't. All policy at the end of the day becomes obsolete. And I think the best part about our country, and particularly about the kind of people in this room, is that ultimately common sense and math win the day. So there are a lot of countries where bad policy survives for decades and for centuries. In our country, it survives too long, we complain about it, but eventually we win the day in terms of what we're doing. So what I'm going to talk about is sort of common sense and math, and give you guys an opportunity to participate. I know it's difficult to see some of these things, so I'll just explain the spirit of what I'm trying to get across here. We've talked a lot from